to another edition of Expert Q&A here on Up and to the Right from Gradient Works. So I'm really excited today. We're going to continue talking about product-led growth, and we're going to be talking about it from a product marketing standpoint with our guest, Marcus Andrews. He's the product marketing group lead for Marketing Hub at HubSpot. He also is the host of the Product Marketing Experts podcast. I've listened to some episodes of that. It's really good. So Marcus, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Hayes. It's good to be here. Excited to chat.
Yeah, so before we dive into PLG and all of that, give me a little bit about your background and your current role.
Yeah, so I'm at HubSpot right now. I'm the product marketing group lead for Marketing Hub. So I lead a team of product marketers, and we look after the positioning and launch strategy and go-to-market strategy of the largest product line at HubSpot, which is Marketing Hub. I've been at HubSpot for 5 years now. Been in product marketing the whole time. Definitely love product marketing. I've got the podcast, like you mentioned, the Product Marketing Experts. Before that was at Google. Before that was at a startup called Wildfire, and an agency. But been at HubSpot for 5 years now. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. All right. So one of the things, we'll get to PLG in just a second, but one of the things that I find really intriguing about the things that you talk about on LinkedIn, some of the things that you touch on in the podcast is this idea of narrative, right? And so I want to start our conversation in a little bit of a different place because I think that's a really intriguing way to think about go-to-market. And so, as you know, our show here and our conversations here tend to focus very much on the revenue specific side of the business. But should we be thinking about this really in like literal narrative terms? Should we think about the customer as the protagonist who's prevailing against the antagonist of their problems? Is there exposition and climax as we think about all the different, structure of the way we engage with customers? Should we be taking that narrative idea pretty literally?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, people care about stories, it's literally the oldest form of communication. The written word isn't all that old compared to like the stories that have been passed down for hundreds or thousands of years. And it's just how our brains are structured, I love PLG, I love revenue ops, but sometimes I think these groups can get caught up in like the numbers and forget about like humans and how emotional we are and how we learn, and also like how we understand things. The PLG is great, right? You can have people get right into the product, but people still are going to make assumptions about your company. They're going to make associations. This is why brand works, right? Like you see certain colors and you see certain words, and your brain like fills in the space around those colors and words, and they associate things with it. So I know that that's how people understand things. So if you're not thinking about your story, there still is a story. What's likely to happen is that you're just going to get lumped into the status quo. Most people, they just say, all right, we create this software, we do this thing, so we're in this category. And then they just kind of try and fit in. It's like, all right, we're just going to try and look and sound like everybody else, because maybe that'll trick people into believing that we're, legit. And it's a really bad approach, because you just end up, becoming part of this like blob. But if you take control of your story, and if you think about your story, you design your narrative, is what I like to say. You can really take it to a place where it helps you build an identity for your company. It helps you really stand out. It helps you really differentiate. So yeah, you should totally this is a good question. And I'm glad you asked about it, because I love talking about this stuff. But like the number one rule I would say is that like nobody cares about you, like nobody cares about your company. They care about themselves. That's human nature. So you should think about your customer as the protagonist. Rule number two is that like most companies, when they think about a story, they go problem solution. And that is so played out, and everybody in your space is doing that. And everybody in your space is looking at your customer and they're saying, yeah, they have this problem. We're just going to show them how we answer this problem. And so again, you just fall into the same long tail as everybody else. You don't differentiate. You don't tell an interesting story. So the way that I think about storytelling, I do think, like thinking about like, if you're in the weeds of a particular story, campaign, blog post, or whatever, you can think about like the story arc and the climax and the challenges. But the simple way that I think about it is that the world is constantly changing all the time. There's these big macro changes that are happening in the world. And your job as as a company is really to help your specific audience adapt to that change.
Mhm.
And that's an interesting story. That's a story that you can tell that's very unique to you and that people will perk up and pay attention to because we're very hardwired to identify change and try and react to it. Whenever like when back in the day when we were, prehistory humans, right? Like if you are out fishing and there's a change in the weather and you don't identify it, you might not make it back home. But if you do identify it, you're going to be able to adapt. It's just like we're very hardwired to identify change and react to it.
Mhm.
And so if you have a company story that identifies a big change, shows the impact that it has for a specific audience, and then you basically tell them how to adapt, that's the framework I really, really like. And I think it's super important, super valuable for PLG companies, any company.
So I want to drill in on the change aspect for
Yeah.
for just a second. So I think you mentioned this idea that we're hardwired to see change, right? We definitely respond to novelty. How do you craft a narrative where there's a level of consistency throughout and sort of a baseline narrative for your organization and what problems you're solving? Maybe I'm framing that wrong, talking about it as problems being solved, uh, but then also make sure that you're including kind of novel things that happen within your industry and that sort of thing. I feel like I see a lot of companies sort of take this and say, well, whatever the buzzword is, we're going to try to tell our story just around that buzzword. So how do you create that?
Mm.
Do you see it as creating a foundational story and then kind of layering on, sort of new things that come into that story, or is it more malleable than that?
I mean, I get the way I think about it is you should figure out the change in the world that you want to talk about. That
Mhm,
could be like right now, there's a lot of change in the world around COVID-19. Like
mhm,
HubSpot is an example I use a lot. Like HubSpot, the founders of HubSpot, they looked at how people were reacting to marketing. They saw that people were blocking and ignoring outbound marketing, and they were
mhm,
interested in this new type of marketing that was kind of attracting an audience. And then your job is basically to translate, like, all right, there's a big change in the world. How is that having, what is the impact that is having on my specific audience? Like,
mhm,
and you usually know your audience. It's like revenue ops or whatever. Like,
mhm,
what is the impact that COVID-19 is having on revenue ops people? And
mhm,
like, how is that changing? Translate that. And then you can help them adapt to that change. And that's really the whole thing that your business does. And like, that is where you can start to tell your unique story, and you can say, like, here's how you adapt to this specific change. You do If you go back to the inbound analogy, it's like, all right, people are blocking outbound messaging, they're more receptive to inbound messaging. So what you do to adapt is you start blogging, you invest in social media, you invest in search advertising,
mhm,
or search marketing. All of these things you can do to attract an audience. And then the next step is sort of, and you can name, and those things often come into a new game.
mhm,
In the HubSpot case, that new game was inbound marketing. You should name your process, which is a great way to stand out, because you might be in the marketing automation space like HubSpot was 15 years ago, but the company went to market with the idea of inbound marketing, and all of a sudden they were unique in this marketing automation space, even though they were very similar from a product standpoint.
mhm,
um, but yeah, that's really, I think, where you can make it your own, and helping companies understand how to adapt, and then also showing that you know exactly how hard it is to adapt. That's where you can introduce your product. We say, hey, look, like, doing inbound marketing is really hard. You got to buy separate blogging tools and chat tools, and you got to learn how to do all of this and sell it to your organization. We get it. We've gone through all of this, and that's why we've built X, Y, and Z. And we've created HubSpot to help you do this thing. So, um, starting really broad with something like fundamentally true and a change in the world that everyone can recognize in their personal life, and then bringing people along through this logical journey that then ends in like what you've built to help them adapt, is that's the framework that I really, really love, and really works, and starts broad, gets very specific.
got it. So I appreciate that. I think the narratives that we tell or don't tell is something that's really, really important. And I also see, especially in a lot of B2B companies don't tell that narrative very well. HubSpot, I think, is a good
Mhm.
example. I've definitely looked at HubSpot in the past as sort of an example of creating a category or certainly refining a category. But I think, I can tell you as somebody who's done a fair amount of competitive analysis as of late, it's hard to tell a lot of B2B companies apart.
There's
That
this
narrative helps
crazy
a lot.
like homogeny, right? And
Mhm.
it's just like everybody looks and sounds the same. And so that's a big opportunity for this. I don't know if if everybody started designing their narrative and taking this approach, it wouldn't be as impactful. But yeah, if you can stand out right now in any space and just be like, it helps people. Like it's so
Mm.
hard to make decisions right now because there's so many options. You're trying to buy, this happens to us all the time. You're trying to buy something like basic off of Amazon and you spend like 10 hours doing research. And it's like, what am I doing here? It's just because we need help to
Right.
try and figure out what's the right thing for us. So you got to help your customers and tell them why you're different and unique for sure.
Yep. Yep. Well, one way that you can be unique and stand out is make it easy to use your product and create a journey around your product. So let's jump over to the more PLG side of the world here and talk about that a little bit more, since that was ostensibly our goal here. So let me set the table with the sort of two flavors of PLG as I see it. So I'm going to put that out there and then see, what your reaction to that is. And so the first flavor I'll call product led acquisition, right? So it's the idea that you have a low barrier to entry, sort of consumer like experience. In many cases, maybe even consumers use your product. You can sign up for Slack and get a Slack account, and start slacking. You can sign up for DocuSign and sign a couple of documents you need to sign, whatever that might be. But then there's a network effect component to that, where you can set up a Slack with your friends or with a group that's an industry group or something like that, right? So there's that acquisition component, but then there's also more of a product led expansion, where the product naturally creates maybe internal network effects or highlights pretty clearly that you need X, Y, and Z to take, whatever to the next level, right? I think HubSpot does a good job of articulating that in the product, where, you start to uncover needs for, I want to test subject lines or something, right? And
Mhm.
that's an example of a lever where, okay, there's more value there that you can unlock. And, usually you can couple that from an acquisition standpoint with, a free tier or a low cost tier or something that reduces the barrier to entry. But I see that expansion component as really fundamentally separate from the acquisition component. Not all PLG products will have both. And so my question really for you is, what's your framework for thinking about PLG kind of as a taxonomy? Do those flavors make sense? And how does that change how you think about product marketing depending on your flavor?
Yeah, I like that. I like how you're thinking about it. That makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's very true. And I think it's smart to have both. I mean, like you're totally right. Like, having winning by getting people into your product and showing value, but then also having the product be the machine that can kind of pull people in, increase adoption, move them through a funnel is really smart. So I like that. The way that I think about product led growth is usually just like through the sales lens, I suppose.
Mhm.
So that is probably what has the most impact on product marketing. I'm not 100% sure if everybody would agree with that, but that is what I look at it. So so is the company totally no touch?
Mhm.
There's not a sales team. This is the type of product and business model and industry where we're just getting people into the product and they're using the product and they're buying. I think you can think of like an app or a game, right? Like there's
Mhm.
not going to, like, if you're like you buy an app with in-app purchases, right? It's still PLG. You're kind of coming in and using the product and buying, but there's no sales team. Um, and then a hybrid model. So people are coming in, using the product. They're in a free trial. Maybe there's a free version and a starter version that they upgrade to, but there's also a salesperson onboarding people
Mhm.
that they can talk to. And then just a sales led strategy with kind of like faux PLG, like a really basic, I don't know, like a basic free trial or like a one, like I don't know if that's PLG. I'm not like the
Right.
PLG expert, but I see that and I don't really think that's great PLG. So, um, I really like the hybrid model. I mean, I think it makes a ton of sense for a lot of companies where the value that sales can bring is really amplified when you have people who can still come into the product for free and get value and understand it and get educated. Um, so I like that. That's kind of the framework how I think about it, because those things I think change what product marketing does inside of the company quite a bit. You know, if you're just a sales led company, product marketing usually sits closer to sales. They're doing
Mhm.
a lot of sales enablement. The work is less strategic, it's way less scaled. And then if you're totally PLG, product marketing usually will kind of replace the value of sales. Where I love salespeople, they're amazing at educating customers, building relationships. So, like, how you still need that in a product led growth business. I think a lot of people assume that you don't, but
Mhm.
humans crave stories and they crave relationships. And like, if your software can offer that, your marketing can offer that. Um, but most don't. Most just replace salespeople, and then they're missing out on all the value that sales brought. So that's kind of how I think about it, you know, and like that, because of how much it will change, or um, how different that means product marketing needs to react.
So I'm glad you touched on the organizational structure that, product marketing or that PLG implies, right? Because I don't think there's not a one size fits all. And I do think that one of the promises of PLG is usually this idea of like, I think just maybe at a high level, there's a lot of folks who are like, okay, I don't have to hire as many salespeople, right? Yay, I'm going to spend less money. But the reality
Right.
isn't that you're going to spend less money. It's most likely that you're going to allocate that money differently. Maybe it's towards product development. Maybe it's towards, the some sort of a different approach to go to market. But I really do think that in most B2B subscription organizations or B2B, organizations, you still need to have a seller who steps in at some point to kind of move the customer up to another tier, usually because the expense is significant, or the
Mhm.
buy-in that you need is significant. So, really digging into that relationship between product marketing and the sales organization, in a PLG company that has still a significant sales function that's in support maybe of leading the growth. How do you of the product leading the growth? How do you think that product marketing needs to be engaged with the sales team in that structure?
Yeah, so if you're in that kind of hybrid structure, I mean, I think the real value of marketing then is that if because in it, like, so in a sales model, sales is super, you touched on a lot there. And I think
Mm,
that you're totally right that if you're going PLG just because you want to get rid of sales, you're a crazy person, right? Because
right.
sales is so valuable. And you don't think, I know there's problems with sales, but sales is so valuable because of how quickly they can educate a buyer and someone who knows nothing about your software, and also build a real human relationship with them. That is extremely valuable, right? Like, it's so, so much of any purchase decision is you gathering context and like understanding what this thing does, and then also just being excited about it, having some sense that this is going to help you like achieve your goals or make you look cool, or put you onto something new. Like, those are
Mhm,
important things that sales is great at taking a cold person who knows nothing about your business and then educating them really, really quickly. So you have to replace that with something. I
mhm,
think that if you pull people directly into your product, um, people, maybe they're listening to this and they're shaking their heads, because you can pull people in when you know they have a specific pain point. You
mhm.
know, like, I need to book a meeting. I'm going to Google what a good meeting booking tool is, and then I'm going to
Right,
download that thing. But
right.
that's it that you're going to get from that person. That's
Mhm,
it. They know that one pain point that you solved for them, and then you're going to try and move them around with product. So that is going to be really, really challenging, where you can pull that person in and you can educate them with a story quickly
mhm,
before they get into the product or as they're in the product. And so they at least understand your point of view and how you think about whatever space they're in, right? Because
mhm,
you could just say you're a meetings tool, but if you say you're, the meetings tool for salespeople in the I don't know, at local businesses or something like that,
Mhm.
you're going to understand exactly who they are, what they're dealing with, and you can tell them this story about like, and then you can think about like, oh wow, now all of a sudden I know that this business gets me, they trust me, they have an interesting story, how they're going to help me adapt to this change, and look, they have all these other ways they're doing it. So, um, I think that you really need to double down more on storytelling as a PLG business because you lose that from
Mhm.
when you have a person who can talk to someone on the phone as they get in. And then the other thing is that so I think there's a huge opportunity there for product marketers at PLG businesses. The other thing is that product marketers are very good at working with product to understand what are those levers to pull people down.
Mhm.
So product is good at optimizing um, the sort of the points and like how we can make sure that the levers that we're using are kind of logical in the flow of the product. But I also think product marketing is very good at understanding like the market and the customer and suggesting like, hey, this person came in for meetings, but you know what, it's likely that they're also uh, dealing with this, and so if we expose them to this tool during the onboarding process or something like that, it'll help. So
Mhm.
there's a lot there, but I think that's the one thing that I think is really important is that as a marketer at a product marketer at a PLG company, think about how you can educate people before and during their first experience with the product, um, versus enabling sales because you're going to do less of that.
Got it. Okay. Well, one of the things that has been a theme that's come up in some of my PLG conversations is this idea, I think, of, and bear with me here, sort of the fungibility of resources, right? Where you
Mm.
previously you kind of had these silos of, okay, product is this, product does this, they develop their roadmaps, they have this budget, sales and the revenue organization are this, and they're in this silo, they have their budget, their targets, et cetera. And every so often the leadership gets together and talks and shakes hands about what they're going to do, but beyond that they're just very separate. But in a PLG world, you get in this place where you start to ask some fundamental questions like, how do we educate the customer, right? And so it becomes this sort of fungibility to say like, well, we have this menu of options. Maybe it's a, a pop-up in the product and some help text. Maybe it's maybe it's an explainer video. Maybe it's a salesperson calls at this point in the process and has a conversation with them. And so you necessarily kind of have to break down those silos because now you're dealing with this continuum where there's all these different places that the customer might be engaged, and you then have to strip it down to what you've been talking about, which is like the goal is to educate the customer with the underlying assumption that'll result in retention or increased revenue or whatever the case may be. So I think that all leads in a large organization to a lot more need for collaboration, and an understanding of like maybe budgets move around a little bit differently and those kinds of things. So how do you think a PLG company should organize that broader relationship with product marketing, with marketing more broadly, and then with sales?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just product led growth. I think a lot of people think about the impact of, yeah, how is that changing sales? But it's really changing everything. I mean, I
Mhm.
think that marketing needs to have a better understanding of the product, where in the past, and this is always the role of product marketers, but I think this is part of the reason why product marketing is becoming more popular. It's just that everybody understands that companies with the best product and how they tell their product story and how they position their product are winning because people care a lot about product, and product led growth is another like symptom of that. I think it's like, hey, we want to get the consumer, big change in the world, consumer wants to get into the product and try things themselves before and evaluate things themselves before ever talking to someone, or if ever talking to someone. That's a huge change in PLG as a reaction to that. But every part of the business, I think, just needs to take a step towards the product as well. So, it's sales is going to change, right? Because if people are already in the product, maybe the role of sales is more of an onboarding guide, or, you're taking, it's almost, it's taking a turn towards like service and support or expertise. And, they have to adapt. Marketing has to adapt because you're totally right. Your product may be the best marketing channel to reach people. You got to be super careful there because you want to keep the product experience like really pure, so like just letting marketing into your product is potentially a bad idea. It can be a great partnership, but it has to be a partnership, right? Like products can't do it themselves. I think, products could say, oh, we know how this is supposed to work. We're going to educate customers on it in the product. And we have a designer who can help, create this video. And then you see what they create. And it's like, this doesn't make any, this is not going to resonate with customers. I think you still want marketing in there to do it. But at the same time, like usually marketing doesn't understand the concept of, like the core in-depth concepts of like user experience. They're like, yeah, let's put a button there and let's put a video there. And it's like the PM's like, no, are you kidding me? Like, we're not going to do that to the product. So I think everybody just has to take a step closer to the product and understand, the how the product works. Like I think a lot of times you talk to leaders in marketing and everybody in marketing, and there's a poor understanding of exactly like how the product works on an in-depth level across everybody. HubSpot's kind of lucky because our marketing team uses HubSpot, so everybody's sort of a user. That's a big advantage for us. But if you've got a marketing team or a sales team that doesn't deeply understand the product and can't collaborate with product, PLG is not really going to work. So um, I think that's really important. I would say also that like very cross-functional teams to help make this easier are important. Product marketing sit in between product and marketing. We know the product almost as well as product managers, but we're creative generalist marketing, so we can pull those two things together. A lot of teams have a growth team that sits in product, or is also a very cross-functional team. Maybe they understand finance and ops, and but also I think PMs are a great person to kind of put on that team. So those cross-functional teams I think make a lot of sense as well. But like totally being able to collaborate, deeply understanding the product, those are super important.
Yeah, I think being able to recognize how the product doesn't just kind of sit on off on its own is really important. And I think you're right that one of the challenges I've seen historically is if you're selling a product that your team doesn't necessarily, the people who are selling and marketing the product don't necessarily use. HubSpot is lucky in my past lives. We've sold marketing related software and comms related software, so those teams at least were utilizing the software there. But it can be really easy really quickly to develop a bit of a disconnect between all the work you go to do market segmentation and ICP and stuff like that, and you actually just sort of lose sight of what the product actually does on a day-to-day basis for your customers. I think that's super critical to do and to keep folks engaged. And do you see that product marketing has some role in terms of that level of education and some responsibility in keeping all of the stakeholders internally educated about the product?
For sure. And that's really positioning when I think about it. There's always this a great company, um, it's very clear that their marketing message and their product communicates, their marketing message clearly communicates like exactly what their product does. Like, like a vaporware, or is when you see a marketing message and then you go into the product and they're totally disconnected. It doesn't do anything that they said it would do. Or you go to the website and you just can't understand what the freaking product is because like it doesn't clearly communicate that, right?
Right.
But there's also the needs of the market and like what the market cares about. And it's really, your marketing message can't just be feature, 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 right? Because it's not going to capture the imagination of the market. So part of the product marketer's job is positioning, and that's really always making sure that all those things are always very tight, so that your marketing message is very reflective and true to the current state of product, which is always changing, and very current and true to the current state of the market, which is also always changing. So it's smart for product marketing to every quarter to look at the different products that you own and just say like, all right, what's changed in what do marketers, for me, I've worked in MarTech for 10 years, which is
Mhm.
great. Cause like, it's easy to be a marketer marketing MarTech solutions, and I'll keep doing it cause it's a good fit for me. But what is changing in marketing? Like, how is that different? What are marketers dealing with? Are we addressing that in our marketing message? And then also what's changed in the product, what's new, what products are launching, what products are we, or we sunset, and then what is the match there. So that's how I kind of describe the positioning process, and that is always ongoing and a huge, probably the number one thing or the number two thing that PMMs should be doing at your company.
Okay, so as the people that are mowing my lawn go right back by my window here, let's wrap up. So I always like to ask this kind of wrap up question before we go. What's the one thing that you think that product marketers are probably getting wrong about their approach to PLG today?
Yeah, so I think there's a big urge to get into the product and use the product as like a marketing channel. And I
Hmm.
get that, and it's cool. And I think there is an opportunity for product marketers to do that and to focus on adoption and to bring that in. But I would just say invest in a narrative, invest in a company level narrative or a product line level narrative that is going to help you educate the market and help people understand what it is that you do, who are you for, and how are you going to help them, your position on the market before they get into the product. Because if you can do that, and that's very core to product marketing, people are going to come in with an education about your product before they start using it, and that's just it's going to smooth out all the edges. So when people get into your product and they see something and they're a little bit confused about it, if they understand why it's there or what your approach is, all of a sudden that's no longer a sharp edge. Or you do great education, you have great content, you have a strong narrative, you're already going to build a lot of brand equity with people before they come into the product or as they're coming into the product. So it's like, what, there's some stuff in this product that um I don't, I get value from some stuff, not from other stuff, but man, this company is creating such good content, and they clearly understand me, and I'm so inspired by their mission. I'm going to keep paying for them. I'm going to look past some of these things that, make it challenging from a technology standpoint. So yeah, I think focusing on that will have a huge, huge impact. Uh, and when the PLG conversation, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the PLG conversation usually doesn't focus on that from a marketing perspective. It usually focuses on how marketers can use the product as a channel, which is important, but it's only one piece of it.
Got it. Well, I really appreciate you coming by to have this conversation. I think this has been really educational. I think this focus on narrative is pretty fascinating. So, anything you'd like to share before you head out?
No, it's great to thanks for having me on the show. It's super fun. Yeah, if people want to if you're interested in product marketing or want to learn more about this, I've got the podcast, The Product Marketing Experts. Find it on iTunes and Spotify, everywhere else. And then yeah, if people want to connect with me on LinkedIn or anything like that, I would love to chat. I've written a few things around narrative design that if people Google me or look for me on LinkedIn can find pretty easily. um, but that's it. Thanks for having me on the show, Hayes.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.